Welcome back. There's less than 2 weeks to go before Election Day in the crowded Democratic primary race to replace retiring Congressman Jerry Nadler for New York's 12th district. And the leading candidates squared off in their final candidate forum last night. The field of candidates includes State Assembly member Alex Boris, George Conway, the ex-husband of President Trump's former campaign manager Kellyanne Conway, Jack Schlossberg, the grandson of President John F. Kennedy, and State Assembly member Micah Lasher, who once worked for Nadler and has his endorsement. And Micah Lasher joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, and I want to start off with this very crowded field of candidates in which you find yourself, including another State Assembly member, Alex Boris, who I just mentioned, and of course Jack Schlossberg has a lot of name recognition given his lineage to the Kennedys. How are you planning to set yourself apart in this home stretch of the race?
I'm setting myself apart, I think, in two significant ways. One, with detailed plans for how Democrats should fight back much more effectively than we have been in the House. What I call Project 2026, how we can use power, even in the minority, to slow down what Trump and Mike Johnson are doing, how we can use oversight and investigations when we win the majority to bring accountability to the Trump administration, and how we can rebuild the laws that they've trampled on so that no future president can do what Trump has done again. And also a record of accomplishment and achievement for New Yorkers. I've worked at all three levels of government in senior roles, and that's why Congressman Nadler, Mike Bloomberg, Governor Hochul have been supporting my candidacy, and I think that's really resonating with voters in the district in the home stretch.
Well, it's interesting you reference those endorsements. That has opened you up actually to some criticism from your challengers. Here's what Jack Schlossberg had to say. I'll let you respond on the other side.
This is the difference, and this is the choice in this election. Whether the Democratic Party should continue the status quo, where has it gotten us? No control of any branch of government, or should we try something new?
How do you respond to that criticism that voters want something new?
Well, I think what I've said is that voters shouldn't have to choose between someone who wants to make change and someone who knows what they're doing. Because if you want to make change, you better know what you're doing. And I'm someone who, in every role I've had, has pushed against the status quo, has taken on powerful interests. When I was chief of staff in the state attorney general's office, helped launch some of the very first investigations into big fossil fuel companies for lying about climate change. I've taken on big tech companies throughout my career, and I will bring that fighting spirit to Congress along with the experience of how to make change in government.
And of course, one of the big debates inside the Democratic Party is what to do if Democrats do, in fact, win back the House. Should impeachment be on the table? George Conway, who you're running against, says impeaching the president should be a day one priority if Democrats retake the House. I've actually spoken to a number of Democrats who say the exact opposite. They say that would backfire, that would embolden President Trump. Where do you stand on that?
I think we have to impeach Trump because he has committed more high crimes and misdemeanors than every president before him combined. And if we were to say that is not going to be subject to accountability, we'd be normalizing that kind of misconduct, and we'd be effectively declaring the constitutional mechanism for the removal of a president. We'd be declaring it to be a dead letter. I don't think we can do that for the rule of law long term in this country. But we do have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And a big part of my campaign is refocusing the party on the economic concerns facing Americans. I'm running on a new deal for a new generation to help people get their first job, their first home, and get through their first year of childcare without getting crushed by the costs. I think those are the kinds of issues that Democrats have to be committed to at the same time as we are bringing accountability to this regime.
So, Assemblyman Lasher, do you reject this argument that it would backfire against Democrats, that it would only embolden President Trump and his supporters?
I think if we were to do impeachment to the exclusion of refocusing on economic questions of costs of housing, job availability, health care, if we were to do impeachment to the exclusion of those issues, then yes, I think it could potentially be a negative for the Democrats. But if we can do both of those things, if we can say we stand for the rule of law, we stand for accountability, and we also stand for improving the lot of working families across this country, I think that will be what voters are looking for from the Democratic Party.
Let me ask you about something that's happening right now on Capitol Hill. Democrats holding up the extension of that key surveillance tool of foreign nationals known as FISA, Section 702, over Bill Pulte. Of course, the housing director being named acting D-N.Y. Speaker Johnson says it's the reason the U.S. hasn't seen another 9/11 attack. He says that's why it's so important. Do you support what Democrats are doing, blocking this extension, or do you think it's the wrong move? Do you think it could jeopardize national security?
I think what Democrats are saying is that we care about national security and we also care about the privacy of Americans. And we want to return to the basic principle that a court should stand in between the federal government's access to Americans' personal information. And when you've got Kash Patel saying he queried some databases to dig up dirt on reporters who were reporting on him and his girlfriend, I think it's not unreasonable to say we should have some protection for Americans' privacy. I don't think that's even a Democrat or Republican issue. I think people on both sides of the aisle should agree that Americans are entitled to a modicum of privacy protections at the same time as we stand up for national security. I think that's what the Democrats are standing for here, and I would join them in that.
Okay. Let me ask you about another big debate, frankly, all across the country, the redistricting battle. You've said Democrats have to fight fire with fire. There's some concern, though, that redistricting in New York could break up majority black districts. Is that something you're comfortable with, or do you think that you should move forward with redistricting in New York?
I've been a strong advocate for fighting fire with fire on redistricting. In fact, right after Donald Trump called up the governor of Texas and said, steal me 5 congressional seats, I introduced the constitutional amendment to allow New York to fight fire with fire. I think ultimately we need a national ban on partisan gerrymandering. But until we have that, blue states cannot sit on the sidelines of this fight. We will lose competition for control of Congress. We'll end up with a Russian parliament, and that will be a point of no return. We can't allow that. Blue states have to fight back, and I'm glad that in New York we've taken the first step to passing that constitutional amendment to allow us to do a mid-decade redistricting.
All right. Well, we are going to continue to track your race very carefully. Assemblymember Micah Lasher, thank you so much for your time. Great to have you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.